Hi VC, it's Aaron Muthalamer and my good friend Jeff Whitcher, and today I'm finishing my countdown of ranking all the Beatles songs. Now, Jeff originally did this and inspired me to do it, so I asked him if it was cool if I did my version of it, and in between that Sam St. John did his, and I'll leave links to both Jeff and Sam's channels so you can check their videos out. They both did a great job. Of course, mine's way different, and this was really surprising to me when I actually sat down and looked at my top 20. A lot of things kind of are different than I thought. So I'm going to start off, and number 20, I've got a song from Abbey Road, and it's I Want You, She's So Heavy. And it's one of their heaviest songs. It's almost a hard rock song at times. Has a lot. I like it because it has so many different changes in it. And, it's just always been one of my favorite John Lennon songs. I grew up listening to Abbey Road, so how it ended the first side so weird. I mean, I'd never really been done before how they did that. So it's always been a favorite of mine.
Yeah, well, and it's interesting because it was written right around the Let It Be or Get Back sessions, if you will, and one of the first songs that they worked on after the Get Back film was wrapped up was I Want You, She's So Heavy. They reconvened in February of, it was either February or March of 1969, and they did a couple of different versions. I think they did a version at Trident Studios, they did a version in their own, Apple Studios where you see some of the footage from the Get Back movie. But yeah, it's got a very minimalist lyric, and that's what John Lennon was going for. He just wanted the passion to come through. It wasn't about the lyrics. It wasn't about clever wordplay like sometimes he was known for. It was more about he felt so passionately about his love for Yoko Ono. He wanted that to come across in the song, and that's why it's probably, next to Love Me Do, it's got the fewest words of any Beatles song. So
it does. So it had a minimalistic lyrical approach, but I think musically it was the opposite, where it had all the different changes and different styles. It has a jazz feel in parts, and a hard rock, heavy metal feel in parts, and bluesy feel. So I've always loved that song.
And also that ending where it just goes on and on and on. I mean, other bands would copy that, like Yes with Starship Trooper, even George on Isn't It a Pity, the first version of that just goes on and on. And I think, there are a lot of bands and artists who kind of copied that after that song came out.
All right, at number 19, one of my highest ranking songs from Magical Mystery Tour. I know Sam St. John loves this song. It's Blue Jay Way. One of my favorite George Harrison songs. I believe it's my fourth highest ranked George Harrison. If I'm counting them right, I might be third. But I've always just loved the lyrics of that, and it's really the moodiness of it. And there's a fog upon LA, and when I was a kid listening to that and driving around in our car with hearing it on 8-track, it just always struck me and stuck with me so much. And it's always been one of my favorite George Harrison songs. I know it's not a real popular one with a lot of people, but it's always been one of my favorites.
It's got a very unsettling feel to it. When you listen to it, it just kind of puts you on edge a little bit. But, the story behind that was George was in Los Angeles, and Derek Taylor, their press officer, he was supposed to be meeting with him. Well, Derek got caught up in traffic or something happened, and he was delayed, and George was just sitting there waiting for him. And so while he was there, he ended up writing the lyrics to this song, and they put it on Magical Mystery Tour. But I think it's one of the lost gems on Magical Mystery Tour. I think people don't, give it enough recognition. It kind of gets lost because there's so many other great songs on there. But yeah, I would say that for me is the biggest surprise in your top 20 is Blue Jay Way.
Is it?
Yeah. Not that I don't like the song, but I was like, wow.
Yeah. There might be one in the top 5 that's a little surprising for you too. So.
Yeah.
All right, up next at number 18, and this one might surprise some people too a little bit, and it's one of the earlier big hits they had, and it was the top-selling single of the 60s in the UK, and it's from the Beatles' second record, and it's on Past Masters. It's second over, way past Jeff said there, right above him, and it's She Loves You, and I've always just loved that catchy song, and what really struck me with it, and what still gets me, is after the chorus, they have the other hook. And that I still get the hair on my arm always stands up every time I hear that extra hook they have in there, and that's why it's a lot more advanced than most singles from that time. I always thought.
And the version on the Beatles' second record, it's got a lot more reverb. It's kind of got that classic, echoey, reverbish sound on it that you don't hear on the UK pressing of it.
That's why I tend to like the U.S. first, I mean, all the U.S. pressings of the first records a lot more, is because they included the singles that they didn't have in the U.K., which I really like.
And Beatles' second record has a flip side of that song also, which was I'll Get You. I don't remember where that fell on your list, but probably...
It was down pretty low.
Yeah, I didn't figure.
Yep. Okay, at number 17 from Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, and it's the song Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. What a great song. You know, most people know the story of John Lennon seeing the picture that I think it was Julian drew and had on his fridge. And it's just a great song. It's always been one of my favorites as well. The first three from that album are just phenomenal. It's just a great way to kick that album off. And it's one of my favorite John Lennon songs. So,
yeah, I like that's one of the songs on Sgt. Pepper where the mono version, the vocal in particular, is very different from the version on the stereo. John's vocal has a lot more flange in it. His vocal's been a lot more treated. The stereo version, it just sounds like John Lennon, but they put, you know, some more kind of psychedelic effects on the vocal on the mono version.
I probably prefer the mono. I like that. It fits with that song really well.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay, at number 16 from the Hey Jude, from Hey Jude in America and Past Masters, it's the Ballad of John and Yoko. And I just have always loved the song. I love the lyrics. It's kind of a story thing, and just all the different things he's mentioning. It's really catchy. It was the final, the last song to reach number one. That was a Beatles song in the UK anyway. And I've always really loved it. And it was surprising. I was talking to my mom, and she was like, "Oh, what's that song?" And I really love that one. It's the Ballad of John Yoko. She was mentioning lyrics, so that was kind of interesting too.
And that was a song that only John and Paul actually perform on. George and Ringo aren't on the track. And John Lennon, he came up with the lyrics, and the lyrics are very autobiographical. It's talking about how when they went to get married, and then the bed in, and kind of everything that they'd been up to since, you know, the Get Back single came out. So in that way, it's very autobiographical, but it's very weird. On the picture sleeve, you've got Yoko there with the other four Beatles, which I always like. I know it's Ballad of John and Yoko, but I don't know. It's still, it just kind of rubs me a little bit the wrong way, but, you know.
It must rub me the right way because I love it.
Yeah.
I get what you're saying about the picture sleeve, though.
Yeah.
Okay, at number 15 from, that's the one I didn't put up, Help. I knew there was another one. So it's Help. And it's always been one of my favorite lyrics of John Lennon. And I know he started and it was a slower version, but I really like the up-tempo version. And it's just always been one of my favorite Beatles songs.
And one of the differences between the UK and the US, obviously in the UK you don't have the James Bond theme before the song Help. And there's actually the mono version, you can find it on, at least in America, the first place we got it was the Rarities album. And it's got a much different, I think it's a completely different take, as a matter of fact, from the version that was on the soundtrack and the version that was on the stereo version. So it's interesting that, you know, popular song, but they use a completely different take of the song for the mono version.
And actually, when we were driving around the other day, it actually came on the Beatles channel while we were driving. It had the James Bond theme. That was really cool, I thought. That
they took it from the soundtrack. Yeah. So. Okay,
at number 14 from, I can't reach over. There it is, Let It Be. And it's the song Get Back. That's one of my favorite Paul McCartney vocals and lyrics, and it's always struck me since I was a kid. I just love that song. It's and seeing the Get Back sessions, it even made me like it more. So it probably creeped up a little more since then for me.
Well, I think it was a revelation when we saw the Get Back film that was just started from scratch. It wasn't a song that Paul had written at home and brought into the studio. He hadn't done a demo of it. You see him actually, he's on his bass guitar kind of strumming the
figure
chords.
it out.
Yeah, and then you see them work through the lyrics. I mean, the lyrics weren't written in one sitting. They kind of evolved over time. And that was really, I think, enlightening to so many. Even like hardcore Beatle fans didn't realize that song had been developed. And the genesis of that song was they needed more songs to fit into the project that they were doing. But you've also got, the single version. That was the first we heard. Not we. I wasn't born at the time, but in terms of the Beatles audience, there was a Get Back single that was released, I think, in March of 1969, and that's the same take as the version that's on here. Even though Phil Spector took that track and he doctored it a little, he put some studio chatter on it, and then at the end he sort of stitched the end of the rooftop, recording on here. But it's the same take. It's just the way that the song had been mixed was different from the single and the album version.
Yeah. Okay, at number 13, all the way over there from Yesterday and Today in America, and it was on Past Masters in the UK is all, and it's one of their biggest singles. Day Tripper. I've always loved that guitar riff. It's one of my favorite things. So memorable, and the lyrics are, very. You gotta kind of think about it. It kind of means different things, and it's just that guitar riff that does it for me, though. It's just one of the best ones in the history of music, I think.
Yeah, well, when they did the remastering of the Beatles catalog in 2009, originally Day Tripper, they had there was a section like right after that instrumental break where there was a note that dropped out. There was like a missing note. I think it was just a flub or just something that was in the original recording. Well, they put the note back in there when they did the remastering. So it's, if you want the original version, you have to get one of, either the Yesterday and Today album or, an early UK, or even the CD version still has that dropped out, the missing note, which they replaced. They put it back in there on the remastered.
See, this is why I have Jeff here. He's the Beatle expert.
A bunch of useless Beatles trivia.
It's not useless. All right, at number 12 from Hey Jude, way over there, and Past Masters, is the song Hey Jude. And I've always loved that song. It's the first, I believe it was the first number one song to be like over about 7 minutes. And a lot of it is the ending, the na-na part at the end, which, I've been drunk many times singing that with my friends, and just keep going and going, and it made it a lot of fun. I just think it's a great song. One of my dad's favorites, too, so I've always loved it.
Yeah, no, I think that's one of the Beatles' best singles is Hey Jude, Revolution. And that was recorded during the White Album. One of those, questions, because obviously the Beatles, they didn't put their singles on the studio albums. But if Hey Jude and Revolution, if Revolution, the single version had been on there instead of Revolution 1, and they had found some space to put Hey Jude on there, maybe taking off Wild Honey Pie or something.
Revolution 9 even.
Yeah, taking Revolution 9 off.
Switching that out.
White Album it's already my favorite Beatles album, but it would be it's already a great album, but it would be that much greater, I think, if that single had been on the White Album.
There's a few albums that is the same for different songs, and we'll get to one of those later.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay, at number 11 from Abbey Road, and this I think is the best vocal performance Paul McCartney ever did. It's Oh Darling, and I've absolutely loved that song since I was a kid. It's my mom's favorite Beatles song, so I heard it a lot when I was a kid, and I still love it. And Paul McCartney, it's just like, it's his twist and shout kind of where he just goes all out vocally, and it's just a phenomenal song. So
yeah, Paul really shreds that song. Usually it's John who's known for singing like that, but then Paul McCartney on Helter Skelter, he's got his heavy metal voice.
Why Don't We Do It in the Road even?
Yeah, and like a song, even like, he used to sing that way. Like you think about Long Tall Sally, he sang that way. Kansas City, he's got that soulful, aggressive voice. But then like in the mid-60s, he kind of abandoned that. You don't really have him singing heavy like that. And then you got Helter Skelter, and then on the Abbey Road album, Oh Darling. But yeah, he can totally belt it out. I mean, he's got a great hard rock voice when he wants to sing like that. And I know John was encouraging him to like, no, you can sing it better, Paul. Paul would go back in there, and John would be like, no, you can still sing it better. And like Paul sang that take after take until he finally got it right. Yeah. And that's I think one of the ways, the Beatles really, that's why the Beatles music, I think, just their solo stuff can't compare, because they were, they're like challenging each other
Feeding
to
off
do
each
better,
other.
encouraging each other, and giving suggestions, and saying, no, sing that better, change that lyric up, or they just the four of them. I think that was lost when they went off and did their solo work.
John kind of challenged Paul to be a little more aggressive, experimental at times, and Paul challenged John to be more commercial, not commercial, but kind of, you know what I mean, that kind of thing, and they balanced each other really well.
Yeah, like tone it down, John. Don't it doesn't have to be so abrasive.
All right, number 10 from Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, my number one song of Ringo Starr, With a Little Help from My Friends. I just love the lyrics. I love it, how it comes right out of the title song, and it always is a highlight of that record to me. One of my favorites from Sgt. Pepper. It's my second favorite, and it's my favorite Ringo Starr sung song. Lennon McCartney wrote it, of course, and I love that version way better than any of the cover ones too. I mean, Joe Cocker did it really well, but not anywhere near as good as the Beatles.
Yeah, well, the original lyric of the song was, what would you do if I sang out of tune? Would you throw a tomato at me? That was what John and Paul originally wrote. And Ringo's like, I'm not singing that. I got to get up on stage. I don't want people throwing tomatoes at me. So he refused to sing it, and then they went and they rewrote it. But that's Hunter Davies, his biography of the Beatles, which came out in 1968. He's got a passage in the book where he's, talking about how they wrote that song and basically giving you what it was like to be there when they were writing that song. I think some of the Beatles' wives were there making suggestions. But yeah, I think it's a very cool Ringo song. It was originally called Badfinger Boogie. That was the working title of it. And they took the Badfinger part and gave it to the band, which is called the Ivies, which eventually became Badfinger. But
now, I do have a question for you. Now, I've noticed on certain things it's listed as with a little help from my friends, and sometimes just a little help. What do you know what the difference is?
I'm not sure why they did that. I mean, it's always, it's on here as a little help from my friends, but like on the label, I don't know. What does it say on the label? That's interesting because, I've always thought of it as with a little help from my friends. Yeah, see, on the label here, it's with a little help from my friends. I think it was just a misprint on the back, the lyrics.
I figured if anyone would know, it'd be you.
yeah, I really, other than it was just an oversight, I think. But, the official title is with.
Okay, we're into the top 10. So at number 9, from Abbey Road again, it's Something, the great George Harrison ballad. It's just one of the best ballads ever written. I think it's one of the most covered songs ever, if not the most covered song ever.
Next to Yesterday. Yeah.
And it's just an amazing song by George Harrison, one of his best. And he could do no wrong in their later years. All his songs were just so amazing. So. Yeah,
well, and he had the melody down for that song, but you see him in the Get Back film struggling with the words, the lyrics, and he did a demo of it on his birthday in 1969. He did a demo of that. I think he did a demo of Old Brown Shoe, and they're on the anthology albums anyway. But he worked. I think he wrote it during the White Album sessions, but he was gonna originally give it away. I think give it away to like Joe Cocker or something like that, and he just didn't think it was strong enough song. And then eventually, as he kept working on it, he realized you've really got something special here. I mean, I think he'd already given it away, if I'm not mistaken, but. I mean, his version, the Beatles version, is just incredible. And the original, one of the takes, I think it's one of the earlier takes, there's like this coda at the end, this piano coda that goes on for like 2 or 3 minutes. It extends the song. I'm not sure why they thought that was a good idea. They eventually trimmed it off and never used it. But, anyway, the most perfect pop song you'll ever hear, and probably one of the best things George Harrison's ever written in terms of a love song.
All right, and number 8 from Yesterday and Today, and from the UK version of Rubber Soul, I've got Nowhere Man. I've always loved that song too. It's just it's one of my favorites. I'll let Jeff take it because he knows so much more than I do.
Yeah, no, well, I was always used to hearing it on the Yesterday and Today album,
me too.
So it's always weird to me when I'm listening to Rubber Soul because you hear You Won't See Me, and then I expect to hear Think for Yourself, and then it's, oh, wait, it's Nowhere Man. What's that doing on here? But, that's kind of, I think like a lot of people our age who grew up with the American albums, like, Nowhere Man's not on Rubber Soul. It sounds so out of place, but...
It does, but it's actually in place. It's kind of weird. Yep.
Yeah, yeah, but that was really, I mean, Nowhere Man, in the I'd say 65, 66, when John Lennon was not touring, he was like laying in bed all day, getting stoned. Occasionally he'd wander downstairs to his studio and maybe make some music, but he would lay in bed all day. He'd sleep till like 3 or 4 in the afternoon and was just kind of disconnected. He wasn't happy in his marriage. He was very, admittedly, I'm not, casting judgment on him as a father, but, he wrote, he was very impatient with his son Julian, so he just was kind of feeling like out of place, and, that's why I think he was, where those lyrics came from. He's really kind of talking about himself. But.
Yeah. All right, at number 7, going to Abbey Road again. And it's the song Here Comes the Sun, another George Harrison masterpiece, and that song always puts me in a good mood. I think one of the most underrated parts of that song is the drumming by Ringo Starr. If you just focus on the drumming of that song, it's excellent. And it's just one of from the beginning guitar intro, and just I think all the musicianship is great on it. One of the highlights of Abbey Road for me, for sure.
Yeah, and he actually wrote that song in Eric Clapton's garden. It had been a busy day. He said in an interview, there had been a lot of Apple business meetings that were very unpleasant, and he was getting very stressed out. And so he went over to Eric Clapton's house, brought his guitar, and just started playing the guitar. And those chords came to him, and he wrote the lyrics. And what more could be said about it? It's one of the Beatles' greatest songs, and I love that it starts off side 2 of Abbey Road.
Perfect placement. Right after I Want You ends all very abruptly. You flip it over and get Here Comes the Sun. Totally opposite sounding song. It's just like, and it just is so perfect.
Yeah, after that, cacophony ending of I Want You, then to flip it over and, it's all peaceful and mellow.
All right, at number 6 from Magical Mystery Tour, one of the strangest Beatles songs and one of my favorites, obviously. It's I Am the Walrus. Just absolutely have loved that song since I was a kid. The nonsensical lyrics and the really cool music and all the different psychedelic stuff in it. It's just always been a highlight of me from my early days.
Yeah, well, and the behind the lyrics, the reason those lyrics are so surreal and have a lot of playful imagery in them is John got a letter from a student at his former, I think it was primary school, that one of the professors, one of the teachers there, whatever you call them, one of the teachers there was dissecting all the Beatles song lyrics. And so John wanted to deliberately write a song that made no sense, that would confound anybody who tried to interpret the meaning behind it. And so he used a lot of, he was a big Lewis Carroll fan. He loved, the Alice in Wonderland books, and, he loved all that imagery and, those stories from his childhood. And so he incorporated a lot of that into those lyrics. But I hate when people, when they're trying to sing that song or reference that song, say cuckoo, kajoo. It's not cuckoo, kajoo. It's goo, goo, gajoo.
Yep.
Pull out the lyrics.
Gajoob.
Yeah.
Yep. All right, at number 5. This song was where I have the first U.S. #1 song, and it was sold 17 million copies worldwide. And it's the song I Want to Hold Your Hand, my favorite early Beatles song, and it always has been. And the more I hear it, a song like that, most people would get sick of, but for me, I've never got sick of it. It's one of those, the hair on my arms always stands up every time. It's like She Loves You when it gets to that secondary after the chorus, the extra hook in it, which I really love, and I just have always loved that song so much.
Well, I maintain it's one of the 3 most important songs of the 1960s. I Want to Hold Your Hand being one, Like a Rolling Stone by Bob Dylan being number 2, and You Really Got Me by the Kinks being number 3, because each in their own way, they pretty much shaped how music, would evolve over the course of the 60s. And I Want to Hold Your Hand was really a salvo. I mean, it was a game changer. Mm-hmm. Nothing else in America sounded like that on the radio. You had the Beatles, and they were singing just a very innocent, positive, upbeat song at a time when America was still reeling from the Kennedy assassination and the Vietnam War was starting to amp up, and there was just not a lot of things to be happy about, and so it just came around at the right time. And I think, ask anybody, name one Beatles song, I Want to Hold Your Hand is going to be one of the first ones that come to mind. But
all right, and number 4 from Sgt. Pepper's again, and it's the most unique song they ever did. It's got half John Lennon, half Paul McCartney. It's A Day in the Life. Absolutely phenomenal song. It might be their best song. It's my 4th favorite. It's just so amazing, and I love all the different, just how different it is, all the changes and everything.
Well, I would love when the Beatles would take 2 separate song ideas that they had and blend them together. Like, We Can Work It Out. Yep. You had Paul doing the verses, and then you had John with the Life is Very Short and There's No Time. And then on I've Got a Feeling, you had Paul who had the I Got a Feeling part, and then John had that demo for Everybody Had a Hard Year that he used for, to kind of sandwich in between Paul's verses on that song, which are very cool. And then you have that on here. John had the A Day in the Life song, and Paul had this fragment of a song called, I think it was actually called A Day in the Life, was the fragment the song had, because that's pretty much what Paul is singing. Woke up, fell out of bed, dragged a comb across my head, got on the bus, came home, got hot, that was just like, yeah, that's a day in the life. And I think that fits more with the title than anything that John wrote. But yeah, I love when they would do that, where, their partnership was such, well, I have this, well, I have that. I can't finish this song, kind of like the Abbey Road medley, how they did that. They had fragments of songs that they stitched together. And that's what made them so powerful and formidable as songwriters, when they could do that. And just the inventiveness, it seemed like they were coming up with all these ideas, like at the end of this, that where the song builds and builds, and you have all the orchestra and Paul giving the instruction, you start here and you're going to end here, and I don't care how you get from point A to point B. And like, what a brilliant idea. And it sounds incredible, but that's, the Beatles were just on a creative high at this point, and coming up with some of the most creative, inventive ideas during this stage in their career.
It's really what they were doing here has been unsurpassed by anybody else in music, really.
Yeah, no.
I think. Okay, at number 3 from the White Album, and this is my highest ranking White Album song, which I've always said is my favorite album, but looking back at this list, I got to rethink it a little. Even though there's a ton of White Album songs in my top 50, it's my only one that made the top 20. So I might have to go over and say Abbey Road and the White Album are tied for me, because they're just so great. And it's my favorite George Harrison song, While My Guitar Gently Weeps. And I just love the lyrics, and having Eric Clapton do the guitar solo. That weird noise they have in some versions, it's really loud, and some it's real quiet, and I don't know what the hell it is. But I love the lyrics of it, and it's my favorite George Harrison song.
And that started out as an acoustic, a very gentle acoustic song. You can hear it on Anthology 3, and then also on the Beatles, the White Album 50th anniversary. You've got Another Take, which was also very acoustic, had an extra verse. And then George, I think, just decided that doesn't really work like that for me, and he wanted to make it heavier. Brought in his friend Eric Clapton to play the guitar solo on it, even though Eric Clapton's not credited, because I think his record company wouldn't allow him, they didn't want him just, guesting on everybody's album. But, you can tell it's Eric Clapton. It's very clearly not George playing that solo.
Yep. And what is that weird noise? You know what I'm talking about?
I do. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's like an organ or a Moog or something, but that drone that you hear. Yeah. That's
on a couple versions of my records, it's really pronounced, and other ones it's kind of in the background. I prefer when it's kind of in the background myself.
Yeah, I kind of do too. It's a little bit distracting. It almost sounds like you got ringing in your ears a little bit.
Exactly. All right, we're up to number 2. Should have been from Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. Really, that's what we were talking about. But it's on Magical Mystery Tour, and it's a phenomenal John Lennon song that's kind of pieced together from a couple different takes, I believe, isn't it?
Yeah, because what they had done is John had, the first part that you hear the song about until, I don't know.
Strawberry Fields Forever, by the way.
Yeah, but about the first minute and a half of the song, that was the original arrangement. The whole song sounded like that. That's also, that version's on Anthology 3. And then John's like, well, you know, I kind of hear an orchestra with it. I kind of hear it in a faster tempo. So they recorded a completely different version of it, which is like the second half of the song where you've got the orchestration. And it was recorded at a much faster tempo. And John couldn't decide which version he liked better. He liked them both. So he said to George, like, put them together. Yeah. Just use your studio trickery. And George Martin is like, well, come on. They're in different tempos. They're in different keys.
And it works.
Yeah, he's like, I can't do it. And John's like, of course you can. You're a wizard. So George Martin went back and he kind of figured out a way to do it. He slowed down the second part and he was able to match the keys. And I mean, it's a brilliant, one of the greatest singles. I think, to me, it's the greatest single of all time, Strawberry Fields Forever and Penny Lane. That's just my own personal opinion, but no denying it's a great Beatles song.
Mine would have to be a different one, but that's really close. But yeah. Okay, so that leaves at number 1, my favorite Beatles song. And this, I was going back and forth. But I picked this song because I had this record when I was a kid. It's the first song I ever heard by the Beatles. And it's one, as soon as I think Beatles, it's the first one that comes to my head almost every time. It's Come Together. Absolutely love the song. The lyrics are cool. And the drumming by Ringo, that drum fill he does all through it is so unique. That's what really separates Ringo from a lot of the drummers. He plays left-handed, and when that sort of bugs me about the Aerosmith version, it's played right-handed, and it never sounds right to me. So I can't listen to any other version except Ringo playing it, but I just love the song Come Together. I think it's just got so many great individual performances mixed into it, and a great vocal from John, and it's always been right in the top 2 or 3 with me, and I put it at number 1.
Well, and John got sued in the early 70s because he took the opening line, Here Comes the Old Flat Top, from a Chuck Berry song, You Can't Catch Me. And so Morris Levy, who owned the publishing rights to Chuck Berry's music, sued John Lennon, and John Lennon and Morris Levy settled out of court, and the agreement was that John would record an album of oldies, and so, you know, they would get the publishing royalties off of, you know, John's recordings of those songs. And that was eventually the rock and roll album. It took a while to get there because he originally recorded the songs with Phil Spector. Phil Spector absconded with the tapes, and John Lennon wasn't sure. That song "Ya-Ya" off of Walls and Bridges at the end, where Julian's playing drums, it's like an afterthought. It was just tacked on to the end of the album. That also was a Morris Levy song, and John's like, there, I covered the song for you, our agreement, you know, I'm done. And Morris Levy's like, fuck you, no you're not. You're gonna record, our agreement was you're gonna record an entire album. And so John eventually had to record the rock and roll album. But anyway, that's sort of, you know, he got sued there. But the song Come Together, it was originally written as a campaign slogan because Timothy Leary was running for governor of California, and his campaign slogan was Come Together and Join the Party, and he asked John to write him a campaign song. So John Lennon wrote the song, and then Timothy Leary never came back to, you know, say, hey, where's my song? And John waited around, and, you know, as he tells it, well, he never came to collect it, so I made $1 million off of it. And
so that would be my favorite single. It'd probably be Come Together and Something.
Yeah.
Which is it. But that's just because they're both in my top 10. So.
Well, and that I mean, yeah, absolutely. The best song George ever wrote, and Come Together, one of the best songs John ever wrote. Yeah, I mean, hard to argue with that.
Yeah, one of the best of each. Yeah. So, all right, well, thank you so much, Jeff, for helping me with this. It's been fun, and thank you for inspiring me to do this. I never would have thought to rank the Beatles songs if it wasn't for Jeff. And, you know, I'm thinking about doing another song ranking of a band, and that's going to be even harder for me than this one. This was the hardest.
Duran.
I love Duran Duran, but it's not them. So, all right, everyone, have a good one. We'll see you next time. Thank you.